Hello to all the debt warriors listening, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie Fata. With the holidays wrapping up and the end of the year just a couple days away, I thought it would be the perfect time to discuss financial goal setting for the new year. If you haven't set any financial goals for the new year, it's never too late to set one or more. Setting a financial goal for the new year is a great way to keep your financial life healthy throughout the new year. Today, I'll be joined by someone who has appeared on the podcast a few times before, Kim Cole, who is Navicore Solutions Community Engagement Manager. Kim always provides awesome financial information, so I was happy to have her on the podcast and chat with her about some financial goals for the new year. Kim and I will be discussing different goals you can set for yourself, how to keep those goals realistic, how to practice mindful spending, and so much more. Now, let's get to my chat with Kim. Hi, Kim. Thanks for being on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Katie. I love being a guest.
Yeah, this is going to be the last podcast of the year. And since you were on the first podcast of the year, I thought it'd be great to bring you back for the last one, too.
Oh, how exciting. And that what that means is Happy New Year to you.
Yes, Happy New Year. I can't believe it. Another year gone.
And an interesting one at that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, this episode, we're going to kind of talk about financial goals for the new year and what goals you could set for the new year and all that relating to finances. So I guess to start, we could talk about what are some financial goals a millennial or a Gen Z-er should set for the new year.
Well, I think that one of the things that we saw, Katie, coming into this year was the absolute need for emergency savings. I think it's something that as a financial educator, we've been preaching for years and years, but I think now we have seen the need for it more than ever. So I would strongly urge that the number one financial goal be establishing that emergency savings account.
Yeah, that's such a great point. We talk about emergency funds all the time here, and I feel like people definitely brush them off. But I think going into next year, that should be definitely a top priority for the new year, especially for young people, because I feel like young people were affected a lot by losing their jobs and everything during this time.
I couldn't agree more. And, just kind of look at how life has changed. And besides loss of jobs, we've also seen, cost increases on groceries and paper products and cleaning supplies, things that we didn't normally really worry about as far as our budget kind of was concerned. And having those emergency funds will help cover some of that weird stuff that we weren't anticipating.
Yeah, emergency fund is a great example of a financial goal someone should be setting for next year. But how many financial goals should a person set? Like, what's too many, do you think? Or,
well, I think that with financial goals, you want to be careful. First of all, I like the term goal as opposed to resolution. Because what tends to happen, as we all know, is we set that New Year's resolution and by March it is forgotten. So with financial goals, I think that it's important to only set maybe one or two, and using that SMART goal mentality. That's the acronym where we use that quite a bit for having a specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound goal.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. It definitely helps with keeping your goals on target, on track. So how can someone prioritize their goals for the new year?
Well, like I said, I think first and foremost, we need to look at what is going on in society today. So, um, setting up that emergency account is definitely one that should be right in the forefront. And what I like to do, and I recommend to all of my clients, in order to kind of keep it in the front of your mind, hang it on your refrigerator, note in your wallet, anything that is going to constantly remind you. And if your goal is going to be savings, look into things like having money drawn directly out of your paycheck and put into that savings account. Try to make your goal as seamless as possible. I think that is really the best way to kind of keep it into the forefront.
Yeah, and I think if you have multiple financial goals, a good thing to do is maybe make a list of your goals. And you can rank them in order of one, obviously being your top financial goal that you want to achieve, and then the list goes on. And make them in order of the most important to the least important. And if you don't get to all your goals that next year, that's fine. You can carry them over and then put the ones that you didn't accomplish next year into the next year, and keep going, because you should always have financial goals every year.
I think it's a great idea. Absolutely prioritizing them is definitely a fantastic idea.
Yeah, and I think some people might want to overshoot their goals, you could say. So how can you keep your goals realistic?
Well, first, again, I go back to what we're looking at today. If you have a job you're making $40,000 a year,
Mhm.
to set a goal in which you're going to save 20,000 of that, while that is wonderful,
Yeah.
it's not realistic.
Yeah.
So, I suggest trying at first to start off, not making it hurt so much. What I mean by that is, if your goal is to um, start an emergency savings account, or if your goal is to pay off debt, which is something else that I'd like to talk a little bit about when it comes to goals. Start off small. Start off maybe with $20 a pay period, $30 a pay period. See where that leaves you. And if you're still doing well and comfortable, maybe try to add another $10 to that. I think that's probably the most reasonable.
Yeah, and I was going to say it's kind of similar. Let's say for a millennial who maybe their goal is to pay off more of their student loans, you can do the same thing. You could start off by adding $10 more to your monthly payment, and then, once you're comfortable with that, go to 20 and 30. And that's kind of similar to what I did with my student loans, and build it up to where you're paying off more and more every month. So that's
I
also a
think
good
that's,
thing to do.
yeah, that's very smart, very smart.
And I think you touched on goals or earlier. So SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And by using that model, you'll be able to make your goals realistic as well.
Absolutely. We use that quite a bit with our financial coaching, where we work hand in hand with someone to reach their financial goal. It really does. I mean, you have to be specific. I want to save, you know, $500 by the end of the year. Measurable. Well, it's measurable goal because you're putting the money into a bank account. It's definitely measurable. Achievable. $500. If that is not completely going to knock your budget way out of whack, then that is probably achievable. Realistic. I go back to the idea of saving 50% of your salary. We'd all love to be able to do that, but is that realistic? Will my family still get to eat if I do that? Probably not. Not realistic. And I always like the idea of putting an end date on my number one highest priority goal, like you had mentioned, so that I have an idea that I'm going to save this $500 by, say, November 30th of 2021. And that's really how you use the SMART goals.
Mm-hmm.
There are some amazing charts and things online templates that you can use to fill those out. And like I said, hang it on your fridge, do whatever makes you comfortable where you're going to see it.
Yeah, it definitely holds you accountable to actually achieving your goal. So that's awesome. So, what are some things you can do at the end of the year to get a head start on your financial goals for the new year? Like, is there anything you can do this time of year to help put yourself ahead for next year on your financial goals?
Oh, definitely. I think that taking a look at your expenses right now by tracking them. We've talked about this in other podcasts, but writing down what you're spending is so important. You can't set a financial goal if you don't know exactly what your financial picture looks like today. So I would strongly recommend setting setting up tracking, writing down what you're spending, and then if you don't already have one, set yourself up on a budget so that you have a spending plan, so you know before you even get to what your goal is going to be, what you have, what we like to call as a liquid asset, extra money to do what you want to do with those financial goals to be able to achieve them.
Yeah, that's a great way to set you up for next year. And I also think a great way to get a head start on your financial goals for the new year is to make sure your debt is paid off. Now, I don't mean obviously like outstanding debt, like your student loans or your mortgage. I mean more of like your credit card debt, because you want to go into the new year having paid off your credit card debt. That's an awesome way to start the new year. Yeah, so I think, if your goal is to build your savings, you'll be able to contribute more to your savings if your credit card debt is paid off going into the new year.
I agree because, with credit card debt interest rates being as high as they are, and saving interest rates being fairly low, you're definitely, from a financial standpoint, making a smarter move by attacking that debt. The other thing about the credit card debt that I would like to point out is that statistics are starting to show us that credit card debt is on the rise. So, of the and I mean, some really crazy numbers that are coming out. There's an article that recently said that credit card debt for paying rent has increased by 80% this year. I didn't even know you could pay your rent with a credit card. Isn't it? So we're seeing cash advances, and we're seeing higher debt for things that we weren't seeing credit cards used for in the past. So I think that looking at those credit cards is really, really important right now. And I think that the other part of that is knowing when to ask for help.
Yeah, definitely. No, I definitely agree with that. It's crazy and how much credit card debt, this we are actually in. And this year I believe that it's more.
Oh, completely. I mean, I even look at myself. We used a service for grocery delivery, and it increased and of course you put it on a credit card, increased our credit card debt considerably because we had to factor in the additional cost of having it done that way, which was much more than I had initially thought it would be. So that would not be something that, had you asked me last year, I would have budgeted for. I budgeted for groceries. I didn't budget for the tip and delivery cost to have it dropped off on my front porch. So we have things that we're charging that are not the norm. And it really is a very interesting time to be looking at spending in this country.
Right, that's a great point. So if it's possible to pay off your debt by the end of the year, you'd be setting yourself up great for the next year when it comes to your financial goals. And like I kind of said, if you have your debt paid off, you're able to build your savings. So what are some tips to build your savings next year?
And I completely stand by the idea of having money taken out of your paycheck by your employer and put into a separate savings account. This is money that you're just not seeing. So it makes it a lot easier not to spend it. I think that's important. I also I did an up spending plan and looking at some of the costs that may help. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing that happened this year more than ever before were people cutting the cord and getting away from traditional television service and going with some of the online programs to reduce costs. So taking a look at some of those costs and being able to find money in those areas. I think that's important as well. And I also love the idea when you're first starting to establish the goal of savings, have something at the end that you want to use that money for. Just as a motivator to keep it going. So if you're already having $50 a pay period taken out and you say, you know what, at the end of this, I want to be able to buy a pair of very expensive shoes. Well, you're already used to having money taken out of your paycheck and it's going to continue. And that savings will continue to build, and it really makes things easier to have a focus.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, I think such a great motivation almost to save. And then I like how you mentioned to look over your monthly services. You really could see what could be cut. You could see, do I really need this every month? That's a great chunk of money that could be cut every month to put into your savings.
Yeah, it really can be.
And then also making automatic payments is such a great idea because, over time you don't see it. So it's easy to save that and it's not like you miss it. So I think that's a great way to save too. And making payments automatic to your savings.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, many of us make automatic payments to our cable company and to our utility companies, and to all of that comes directly out of our bank account. We are, very much a technological society. We don't think about it so much. I don't think about the fact my cell phone bill was paid until I get that little email that says thank you for your payment, and I didn't even make the payment; it was automatically taken. It's the same way with savings. That money will be deposited, and you go, oh, another $50. So, you use the kind of reverse psychology on that.
Right. And I think another goal a lot of people said is they want to start budgeting, especially if they've never done it before, especially after this year they've had. So how can someone start budgeting if they've never done so before?
Well, there are some amazing tools available to people that want to start to budget. And there are different websites and apps that they can use. Some people like to go old-fashioned and just use a book or an Excel spreadsheet. Navicore Solutions has some great tools on their website for free for budgeting. But really what you need to do is sit down and look at what you're spending and what your income is. The other thing I like to advise my clients, when you start your budget, the first thing you need to do, and we've all heard this term before, is pay yourself. 10% right off the top. Number one should be going into your savings account to you. And then look at your monthly expenses and base your changes that need to be made and your savings and everything else off of that, because it really is paying yourself first is the best thing that you can do for yourself.
Yeah, I agree. We actually have a video here for Navicore about paying yourself first. So I'll link that in the description of this podcast as well. But in regards to budgeting, we've definitely talked about budgeting in other podcasts, and we have different resources, like Kim said, on the Navicore website that can help you create a budget. So I'll leave all that information in the description of this podcast so you can kind of get a more in-depth, detailed budgeting. So since we talked about it a little bit before, I'll just go over some basic categories to include in your budget too. So if you're a beginner, I think if you're just starting to budget, it's easy to break your budget into two categories. They are your fixed expenses and your flexible expenses. So fixed expenses are those that are the same every month, which would be your mortgage, rent, or car payment, something like that. And flexible expenses are things that are different every month. They vary. The amount varies every month. So groceries, entertainment, other miscellaneous things. So those are two categories you can use to break your budget into, and then different subcategories as well. So, staying on top of your budget can be hard if you're new to it and you're not used to it. So, what are some ways you can stick to your budget and achieve your goals?
But one of the things that I strongly recommend doing is revisiting your budget very often. It needs to be in your face. We have found that money in its own right is a very psychological thing. And savings can be a lot like a diet. And so we've found that things like food diaries and counting calories and writing them down, all of that are very effective ways to stay on a diet. It's the same with your budget. Looking at it, revamping it, rewriting it. I have to be honest with you. There are some really great organizers, and get some colored pens and make it creative, make it fun. It does not have to be pain. And like I just keep at it, keep going at it on a regular basis.
Yeah. I think for millennials, there's like apps out there that are so great. Like the Mint app, I actually have it, and you get emails from it all the time saying you might have gone over such and such category, and it helps you definitely to stay on top of your budget because you're like, whoa, did I? And then you go back and see how much you actually spent. It's definitely a great tool that has come out.
That's so amazing, especially for the millennials. Traditionally, the millennials are so much more comfortable in the digital world, and I may not be a millennial, no, but I'm close. Uh-huh. My phone is attached to me. So, if something were to buzz and say, "Hey, Kim, it looks like you spent a little bit more on groceries," that's awesome. So I love that idea. I think that's great.
Yeah, no, I love it definitely because then you can, and it's easy to update it. It only takes a minute. If you're like, oh, something might go up this month, definitely update it. So it's definitely a great tool for especially millennials to stay on top of their budget. So another goal a lot of people make for the new year is based around credit. So if you're looking to build your credit in the new year, what are the first steps you should take and what would that credit goal look like?
Okay, so starting a credit portfolio can be difficult. That old idea that which is worse, bad credit or no credit, that no credit is worse, is actually kind of true.
Mhm.
So trying to obtain credit right from the start is kind of hard. So what I always recommend is first of all, you need to have bank accounts. You need a checking account and a savings account, and you need income, verifiable income. Once you got that under your belt, the next move is I like using or like certain products called like credit builder loans that banks are starting to put out. There are the good old fashioned gas credit card, which I like to laugh about because getting a card from a gas station, you can't go too crazy with it, and they tend to be very, very easy. And of course, then there's also the credit cards where you leave a deposit. And this is different than the prepaid credit cards. In this case, you leave a deposit and it's held in a bank account, and you don't see that money again, and you continue to use your card. And the card is reporting to the credit agencies, which you definitely want to make sure that they do, and not charging you crazy fees. You pay it every month, which is doing wonders for your credit score. And again, credit, the money sitting in the bank is securing that credit card. So we call that a secured credit card. And then usually after 6 months to a year of on-time monthly payments, the banks will give you your money back with the interest usually, and then issue you a card that does not require that security, putting you now on the path of having traditional revolving credit.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's definitely credit advice from beginners. It's funny you actually mentioned the gas card because I actually have a gas card which I use to build my credit. So it's a great starter. And then I think for any Gen Zers listening, because they kind of would be, in the age where you should start building credit. I always say to just maybe if you're starting with a credit card, maybe just charge like your one thing on there a month, like your groceries, to show that you're using it, but you can also make sure you pay it at the end of the month because you definitely want to make sure you're paying it off at the end of the month.
Absolutely. And the great thing about paying it off at the end of the month is you're not going to get hit with the interest. Yeah. So that's a smart way to do it.
Yeah. So talking about spending on your credit card and stuff. So what are some ways to practice mindful spending?
Mindful spending, it can be tough when you first get involved, particularly with credit. My generation, what we did was we went to the mall, and every store we went into offered us 10% off if we took their card, and we got a bunch of store cards and went crazy with them and ended up in a whole lot of debt. So I think mindful spending is critical because when you start, like I said, getting involved with credit, it can get out of hand if you're not careful. Shopping with lists are very important for mindful spending. Going in with the idea, knowing how much you're going to spend. I recommend leaving your wallet in the car if you're going to spend, if you're going shopping. And then if 24 hours later, that item is still that important to you as it was when you saw it in the store, then go for it. But for a lot of us, 24 to 48 hours later, we're kind of like, yeah, I don't want it that bad. So, that's another way to just kind of watch your spending.
It's definitely hard to spending nowadays with credit cards and online shopping is definitely. I like to if I want something, I'll leave it in my bag, and then if I really want it the next day, I'll actually buy it. So I kind of do practice that, but it's definitely hard nowadays, and it's so easy to spend with the cards.
Oh, I mean, it's ridiculous. I actually have, I don't even know how this happened, where I'm on stores, and I'm like, oh, I'll click on that, and I don't even need a credit card in my wallet. It just all pops up, and it's like, oh, okay, and off I go, and then it's like 2 weeks later or a week later, Amazon 2 days later, and I'm like, what? What did I order? So
that's like nowadays it just pops up. Like I don't have to get up because I remember if I wouldn't want to get up just to get my card, like, oh, I don't need it. It's there.
Yeah, it was funny. I saw something on Facebook recently that said that I am not going to actually go online and shop. I'm just going to stand in front of my computer and yell at all the things I want, and Amazon will put it all on there anyway. I mean, you could look at something and then on your Facebook page, you're getting emails about it. It really makes it tough for mindful spending because what you look at in your face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely is. It's everywhere, and then having the credit card just be in your computer definitely makes it so much easier. But that also means that debt can build up fast. So with debt building up fast, and setting a goal to tackle your debt next year is a common goal if you can't pay it off before the end of the year. And sometimes that can be more than a person can handle on their own. So at what point should a person reach out to a nonprofit credit counseling organization such as Navicore for debt management help?
Well, first of all, the thing I like about Navicore Solutions is that the counselors are great at helping people identify where their situation really is. And what I mean by that is, am I at the point where I need a debt management plan? Am I at the point to file bankruptcy, or am I at the point where I can manage this on my own? But I really think that when you're looking at your monthly bills and all you can do is pay the minimum on a credit card, and that's all you can afford to do on your cards, you're already in trouble. People think, oh, I can pay, all those minimum payments, so I'm perfectly fine. That's not the case. The case is that you're already in trouble. So my recommendation is, when you start to feel that you can only make minimum payments, pick up the phone.
Yeah. That's a good point. That's when you should pick up the phone. And then, after talking to some counselors on this podcast throughout the year, I've talked to a few, I've learned that a lot of clients are hesitant to join any debt management program for different reasons. And sometimes they're just hesitant to reach out to us. But after talking to like counselors and learning more about the program, they might feel more comfortable about joining. So, at the point, you just have to do it. It'll be better for you in the long run.
Oh, without question. I think that, any time that we're looking to make a change, and being on a debt management plan does require us to make changes in our spending habits, can be a little unnerving, but being able to pay that debt down in 5 years as opposed to 30 years, saving yourselves tens of thousands of dollars in interest, and learning how to survive without relying on credit cards can also be very freeing.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important that people realize that, yes, it's a little intimidating, but in the end, the benefits will outweigh that uncomfortable feeling for that short period of time. I mean, just so much.
Yeah. And, obviously there's financial benefits to doing our program, but, there's also mental benefits. Like, debt is such a big stressor for a person. And, we've talked about this in a previous podcast. Debt can significantly affect your mental health. So there is a previous podcast episode I recorded with Kim that I'll definitely put in the description of this podcast, as well as some resources we have on the website for that. So, debt can cause extreme stress for an individual, but by following through with our program and becoming debt-free, that stress can be eliminated from your life. So don't hesitate, because that can definitely take a turn on your mental health.
Oh, without question. And I think it's important just to reiterate that not only are the counselors highly educated in the area of debt management and personal finance, they also talk to each person in a completely non-judgmental way. And if you think that your situation is the worst that they have ever heard, I can assure you that they have heard worse, and that you're not going to shock anyone, right, or any counselor, because it's, money takes us to weird places, and it really, again, very psychological, and the counselors do not judge.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's confidential. So no worries about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. I think that wraps up all the goal setting questions I had for the new year. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
I just want to thank you so much, Katie, for bringing this to light. I think that as a millennial, at least I know when I was that age, I had so much on my plate at that time. I had student loans. I was trying to figure out my next career move, trying to move out. All of these things were happening at once that I spent several years just spinning my wheels. And you have brought so many amazing topics out there to the millennials that really do think that if they listen and hear what you're saying, that it's going to put them in such a better position. So whether it be goal setting, whether it be, dealing with debt, whatever the case may be, I think it's just critical that everybody, not just millennials, listen to this. These amazing podcasts that you've done. And I'm just thrilled to have been your first guest this year and your last guest of this year.
Yeah, I'm sure you won't be the last time ever. We'll definitely have to have you on again next year.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely learned so much about finances just working here, and I'm glad I get to I've gotten to share that with everyone this year, everything I've learned, and I think we've had some great topics this year. So thank you again for being here, and Happy New Year.
Oh, and Happy New Year to you and your family, and thank you again for having me.
Yes, thanks. I always like to have Kim on the podcast because I think we can collaborate on some great ideas for the listeners to use in their financial lives. I like how Kim mentioned these are financial goals, not resolutions. Resolutions are something you want to change, whereas a goal is a specific task you want to achieve. We talked about many different financial goals you can make this year, but it's up to you to decide what goal or goals will work best for you. It's okay to change your financial goals throughout the year. Sometimes your original goal might not make sense anymore, or you are able to accomplish that goal early. Whatever the reason is, changing your financial goal is totally okay. Setting a timeline for your goal will also hold you accountable and make you more willing to complete that goal this year. Since this is the last episode of the year, I wanted to wish everyone a happy and healthy new year. Thank you to all the debt warriors who have listened to this podcast in its first year of production. I hope myself and the guests who have joined me this year were able to help change your financial life for the better. With that being said, this wraps up another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, rate and review us there. I'll talk to you in the new year, millennials, Gen Zers, and everyone else listening. Bye.